Chapter 13.3 Viking. Oh, my readers, my book seems to keep growing all along. When I was conceiving this book, I didn't even remember him. But when I mentioned Viking in the chapter about Thomas, my thoughts about him just kept following me, and I realized that I won't be able to get by with a short footnote about him. He deserved a whole chapter of my book. He was a guy with a strong personality after all. You may have noticed that not all my friends have betrayed me, but some of them have gone out of my life in not much less inglorious way. But before that, he was one of the few I probably would share a foxhole with. Hell of a guy. He was both reckless and high-hearted. Hadn't he lost his eye in his childhood? That's where he has got his Viking appellation from. I bet he would have become either a KGB or GRU officer. His favorite movie was The Officers. His favorite books were about wars and special services of spies and scout saboteurs. I remember he had Grivadis Gorpazhak's book. I just had found out that these Grivadis Gorpazhaks had in fact never existed, and this book has been written jointly along by the three Russian writers. About a U.S. Commando Green Beret Gene the Untouchable. There was another book as good about a disgraced Abwehr agent who had saved a Jewish girl and destroyed his career because of that, and who was given a chance to atone himself by plotting and bringing about a Churchill kidnapping, which failed. It was from him I learned about Otto Skorzeny guy, his role model. He loved everything associated with scout and saboteur entourage. Some sort of invisible front daydreamer. Despite his artificial eye that made him look ugly, girls still adored him. And I had some respect for his fearlessness. By then I wasn't fighting much myself. I only had 2 major brawlings in the north. After one big fist fight we had to do some major renovations in our dorm room. One drunk from West Ukraine had provoked a fight, for what he got his ass kicked by me, all right, and his fellow Ukrainians gave him more to bring him back to senses. And the second one, that seems to be the last serious fight I ever had, was when I was 25. I clashed with some drunken mugs. Damn, another chapter is about to come up, I think. Maybe I should write about this fight separately because I was so good there. Especially this such epic fight of mine was the last one I had. Had I been on my own there, I mean with no women around, it was them I was protecting. I'd rather get out of there. I would never take any chances with them, even if I was drunk myself. But I would never bail out on girls, especially those beautiful ones. No way could I afford to lose my face. Well, I had to stop the one who started it all. I overplayed my hand a bit. The guy was taken to a hospital to sew his ear back. My pace had turned out to be too heavy. I broke his external ear rim so bad that his ear hung on its lobe. The girls later said it looked damn gruesome on him. There was no stopping now. Even those girls tried to stop me, to no avail, and the rest of the guys just ran away. The next day they all came to see who it was who had mutilated all of them. And I was a disabled one after my work injury, and my left hand still didn't work, so I fought with my only hand available to me at the time. Well, after what I had done to the brawler's ear, I was scared myself. My sweet ones were getting dangerously devastating, and I vowed to avoid any fights to the last. Reason with people to the last possible moments. And you know what? Up to now, it seems to be working. Still, I thought Sergei's fearlessness was well ahead of mine. He wasn't my friend per se at first. First, I saw him with Thomas when they dropped into our place before we all moved into the new dorm building. I remember I was boasting Sasha with my new fashionable album recordings and the cool Iron Maiden and Europe posters I had. And Sasha said that they had even better posters. Viking said nothing, just looked at all these with an ironic smile on his face. I made friends with him later when I was visiting Sasha, who now lived next door to me in our new dorm, to play cards or just to have a smoke with him. Both Viking and Thomas were very good at playing cards, much better than me. Whenever I played with either of them, to my 2 winnings I would consistently have 3 losings. And I could do nothing about that. "You better count your cards," didactically would say Thomas. Right. I had a real problem with that. I told you I never been good with math. That's why I never played blackjack, preference, or other gambling games with them. Otherwise I'd lose my shirt to them. Sergey worked as a carpenter in construction. I have no fucking idea how in the world he managed to pass his medical examination for this job with his one eye. Sure, he knew how to persuade people, but still. When we all had moved into new dorm, he even made window curtains hangers for his room. They looked ugly, but at least they worked. The others didn't have any kind of that whatsoever. After work, he'd go to a gym in the basement nearby to work out his muscles and punch some balls. Despite this, he still looked like Skinny Minnie, but he fought like hell. Very brave and impressive, I would say. He was feared in the town. It's a known phenomenon. Guys of his kind easily find each other and form again, and soon they would start terrorizing the neighborhood or even a town. That's what happened in Raduzhny. These guys found each other fast. It happened at a disco on August 2, the Paratroopers' Day. For those who have no clue and never lived in the Soviet Union or Russia, I think I must explain what it all was about. Paratroopers' Day is significant. No marketplaces are open this day. Something real violent and collective subconscious that slept for a year is going to wake up this day. This something in part might be imperial, partly proletarian, partly something very totally nationalistic, what was suppressed and being humiliated for the whole year. Well, we have March 8 here, when once a year men could bring coffee to women in bed and tidy up the house. And we have August the 2nd, when a Russian paratrooper once a year remember who the fuck is master in Mother Russia here, and clean at least once a year some of the non-Russian mentioned the parasite's clock. For having settled well and doing damn good, while they, the real men, had shed their blood in Afghanistan, carrying out their internationalist duty, helping the poor peasants. The first half of the day they would ride through and around the cities and towns waving their airborne flags, and in the afternoon they'd start bathing in the fountains, fight in the marketplaces and discos. It's a fine tradition. That's the way I met many of the guys I made friends with when they all gathered in 1988 at Thomas' room, all sober yet, to decide where they should go to get started. Then they left noisily, and that same afternoon I was running with many responding to the "Our Guys in Trouble" battle cry. It wasn't our guys who were in trouble. Our paratroopers were beating the Azerbaijanis at the illegal outlet they were selling their smuggled vodka. No matter how much vodka you got at first, you'd go again for it. No exception. So they did it. And it was time they got started. By that time I was no longer a fight enthusiast, and with a disabled left hand, you know now, So I was more like damping down some of the paratroopers who had gone a little bit too wild. That's where I met Andrei the Peace Double, a very handsome one who looked like the young Nemtsov, the Russian opposition politician guy I always liked and who got himself killed. And Yegorka the Tatarian guy. Both were strong, neat like pit bull dogs and health-gifted by nature. It was especially hard to calm down Andrei. Well, he was a real trooper. Andrei kept raging all night long. Several times he'd struggle out from me and Thomas and rush into the middle of battle. Then later inside the dorm he yelled that his lips looked swollen. Now he looked like Paul Robson himself. And he was particularly angry at me that I was the one to stop him from having this out with those scabies. He had died in a year and a half in a car accident with his pregnant fiancée and future father-in-law, right in the middle between Nizhnevartovsk and Raduzhny. They were on their way to Nish to shop for wedding dresses. We, the whole crowd of his friends, went to get all three of them put together from pieces from the morgue. During the funeral, it was Viking Sergei who kissed Andrei's dead body's forehead, and we all followed his gesture. It was hard to recognize Andrei. At the memorial service, I met Andrei's ex-wife. She was beautiful and tall and looked pedigreed. She reminded me of some both Russian and Hollywood actresses. And she had a damn whore reputation. She was called Emmanuel in Raduzhny. It's not my rule to judge anyone, and I would never act rashly, especially with her. Drink less, man, and give more attention to beautiful women of yours. And you'd know that, since they have more from you, there's a good chance that they won't sleep around no more. Well, what a beautiful and healthy babe should do with the guys like you. We still have them more than us, men. And with age, this demographic ratio becomes even less favorable to them, the women. And what should they do about that? And I don't mean to become the devil's advocate here. Well, I have digressed a bit. Sorry about that. Back to Viking again. I remember Sergei with sadness. There's not much I knew about him. I knew that he was from Kazakhstan, from the village of Shartandy. He was a Hungarian by his father, he never knew, and Russian by his mother, spirit and mentality. Yes, he was patriotically charged, and he didn't approve my anti-Soviet attacks, but he wasn't after me objecting that either. Everything around was going down and collapsing anyway under the onslaught of perestroika. He wasn't an avowed nationalist. He had some Dagestani friends, but regularly fought with the Azeris though. That was just a fine tradition, that's all. Well, he drank once in a while, as we all did. We all were young. Someone was getting married once in a month, or even more often, and we all were looking forward to yet another wedding just to eat properly. All weekends, like all of us, we went to the disco to pick up some beauty. I had noticed that he liked the burning brunettes, non-Russian looking women, a Dagestani style. He even liked a drummer girl of one of the Russian pop group because she looked like one of those beautiful non-Russian girls he liked. Well, he has found his future wife Angela to his liking. A Dagestanian burning one who looked like those Indian Bollywood actresses from posters. Much later when I saw Amy Winehouse, that's whom Sergei would love to once he saw her. That's what Angela looked like exactly to me. Angela was a judo wrestler and a champion of town. She was a certified candidate or a master of sports. I saw myself whenever they were horsing around how she was skillfully throwing Sergei using her trained judo tricks. Fighting she could speak, and she was a self-willed one too. And don't forget that she was a Dagestani girl. Represented a very peculiar people with very different from Russian mentality and culture, and she had relatives who would never allow her, who had just graduated from a high school, to meet a guy on her own, especially with a Russian guy. This was true love, and this was mutual. Well, if she was not allowed to see Sergei, she ran away, and her sister had joined her too. And they hid from their families and lived in Sergei's dorm room. Sergei's room turned into a hilarious farce or something, and Thomas, by the way, did not like it at all. A lot of new and young women showed up. Angela's friends mostly, who would often stay overnight, literally stockpiled on the sleeping pad. And now sex. No kidding. Sasha, the general, was making fun of that like, so many women available and no sex, can you believe it? And I'm fucking married. To what Viking retorted like how long he had lived with Olga before she gave him that one. In the meantime, Angela's relative continued to hunt her and her sister down in town. I even heard that they threatened to kill them both. And they had tracked down our dorm. The police raided our place several times trying to get those girls. But the girls always escaped. Somebody warned them on time. We gathered at Sergei's to party his birthday, starting with eating and drinking at a long table, and there were about 30 of us, including those girls with unknown status, when in the middle of our party, Angela's relatives broke into our apartment. There were their mothers and aunts. I haven't seen any men with them there. We blocked their way with our bodies, saying that there is no one they were looking for, at the same time accusing them of the illegal invasion of our privacy and for the mistreatment of their kids and women for that matter. They, however, immediately noticed their daughter's shoes and jackets in the hall and screaming that they were going to stab them right there for their disgraced honors. Those crazy women broke the hell through all our fucking defense lines and stormed into the room where Angela and her sister were hiding. They ransacked everything upside down in our room. There were no girls in there. The commotion in the entrance room bought our girls some time for them, barefooted and with t-shirts and blue jeans on them as they were, to jump down from the third-floor balcony, and it was winter outside in Siberia, and ran the fuck off somewhere. Can you believe that? This is how they should be fearing their parents, so they didn't hesitate to jump off the balcony. Probably they just would have them killed all right. The friendship between Sergei and Thomas cooled down when these girls came along. At the same birthday party, Sasha almost got into a fight with the Tooth, one of the friends of Vikings. Sasha did not like these girls, those no sense as he viewed them. He didn't like all these low farce mess. With these girls, some new guys came along I never knew before. The Broken One, I even forgot his real name, and he got his appellation for his broken nose, which was fractured in so many fights he had. Ninja, I think you could guess he got his appellation from. Tooth, anatomist, no kidding, he worked in a morgue. Fingerless, no fingers on his right hand. And others. I first saw the Broken One at a disco in a suit with a bow tie when he came from wedding in a next-door restaurant. He was from Kazakhstan too. One of the deadliest fighters I knew in town. A bona fide gym rat too. He had his own strategy on how to build his muscle on him and how dry them up to get them gain some relief. He was seriously preparing for some very important competition of his. And he was quick with a knife too. Once he nearly killed Thomas when Sasha drank and in the heat of the moment said something inadvertently insulting to the broken one. The tooth in his shorts, he was already sleeping when this was about to happen, was the one, I think, who stopped the broken one. And once the broken one got so upset, after the banquet where the anatomist celebrated his 2 years of suspended sentence for vandalism, and they all had some brawling among themselves, that he stabbed himself. Since there were nobody else around to stab, all were his dear friends. And while Tooth was crying and trashing the room and throwing his television set out of the balcony, Viking personally brought him on his back to the hospital, where he stayed for almost a month. Once, while we were having good time in one of the first cooperative sauna I was running with the Mrs. Gang, with those hilarious girls, all his acquired property like his luxury open-reel tape recorder and clothing was going away in a fire with the wooden dormitory he used to stay in. Since then he lived at Viking's place. He wasn't a friend of mine, though I was involved in several fights on his side provoked by him. But he had a good managerial potential. He was good at having the emerging businesses to pay him so nothing happened to their businesses. He has set up a gangs fund. He could have made a good entrepreneur himself, but wouldn't do it for his street code reasons. It ain't right to be a fucking pusher. Some of his smarter friends started their own businesses, and some even amounted to something big time, and more importantly got out of this quagmire. And this one, starting at about 1989, began to shoot up and quickly burned out, and around 1992 got his golden shot in a fucking hop joint. That's the way all his youth, all his energy went into nothingness. Those guys, they all were like of my age, but they all had these some strange gang greeting rituals, carried along like those fucking kids, right? They obviously must have borrowed those rituals from Angela and her friends. This prison jive talking, the emphasized thief ethics. I realized I didn't belong there. In a way, the guys were not bad. They were fearless, all right, sometimes really violent. They were gym rats. They all went to work out in a basement nearby. But I didn't belong there. Those guys had not grown yet. So, Sergei with his gang, Angela, her sister, however, as the more educated and responsible one, was forgiven and accepted by her relatives back home, and her parents quickly married her off, no longer taking any chances with her. And her friends went to his mother's home to Kazakhstan for a wedding, his and Angela's. It was fun traveling to Kazakhstan by train, real fun. They took up 5 units in a coach. They all were slightly drunk. With champagne and vodka they had a lot with them, and stoned all the way along. 3 days on the road went just like 1 hour. Imagine Viking's mother being cornered by so many unexpected guests. There Sergei and Angela got married. Well, unofficially yet. But what the hell? Sergei has become her first, and who knows, probably her only man. True love. And how self-sacrificing it was on Angela's side. And they celebrated that occasion the way it should be. They partied for a couple of days and then stopped by a local club disco on a little railway station. And the gang's girls were gorgeous. And they were so conspicuous to locals. But it was not enough for them. They had long since learned that with such friends they had, there was nothing they couldn't do. And now they were dancing on the DJ stage. They were above all. Even in Raduzhny these girls, they guys, however, didn't give much shit to music. Changed their repertoire of the local discos to their tastes. Especially they were ecstatic about the one which was the apotheosis of their bad taste. They all sang along with these stupid Buonasera, buonasera, signorita, buonasera, signorita, ciao, ciao. Excuse me. It was always put on whenever these girls came along there. And now these guys nobody knew here acted as if they were big shots here. Tension grew, and here we go. The broken one just put some local brick shit house down, and all hell broke loose. Our guys, the bunch of psychopaths, would end up in real trouble, no escape. After their first charge that caused havoc and confusion and disruption of discos, our guys took the girls and quickly retreated before the locals came back to their senses. Nice teamwork, boys. Then the locals on trucks were looking for them, driving all the local railway stations, shops, and the surrounding villages for them, armed with irons and clubs. They sure were damn strongly tuned. Our guys got away. That's how Sergei and Angela got married. Angela's relatives resigned and forgave her too. And they had helped her with the work. Later, Sergei and Angela got officially married, and a year after that they had a handsome kid. Now they lived separately on their own, and I visited them once in a while to play cards or just have a little schmooze or something. By this time, Sergei discontinued his work. So did many of his friends. The criminal street code rules were getting deep and taking over in the community. It wasn't cool to work by the underworld codes. It was lower than even being a fucking pusher. Game fucking over. They were getting serious about making money by stealing, racketeering, or just ripping off the emerging entrepreneurs. I didn't like seeing this transformation in a man I considered a friend. But I didn't even try to re-educate him. I knew him good enough to figure it was useless. They all adored the Once Upon a Time in America movie. They ran in a lot of video clubs. And once it was shown for a week in a town movie theater, and the whole town went to see it. All tickets were sold out. I love this movie too. Not for the true friendship and the bandits' honor saga, although this also was delivered beautifully and was very romantic. It was a good movie too. Real art. It was an iconic movie for our underworld with its model heroes. That niche was later occupied by its Russian counterpart, the patriotic version like The Team, Once Upon a Time in Russia. Life went on, guys kept going to the gym, I often joined them, and regularly I drank with them, but somehow those guys started to take to smoke marijuana a bit too often. In the meantime, our guys got some new clothes. Some of them got VCRs. Their new businesses brought them more money than my job was bringing me. One moment that eloquently describes Viking. Once, before Sergei moved out of the dorm to live with his wife, he showed us his old, brought from Kazakhstan, black and white photos, and in one of his pictures he pointed to a guy in a group with no Viking there, telling us that this guy was drowned in a swim by his friends in this photo when they found that he turned to be a practicing gay. That's the way that gang had washed away its shame. That was the environment Sergei grew in. They are very cruel to all kinds of minorities in this country, so whenever I have heard of such things, it wasn't something beyond me. Viking with his eye prosthesis was very recognizable in a small town like Radozhny. Very distinguishing characteristics, as they say. And he got stung on this. That summer the gym was being renovated and the entire sports equipment was moved into our dorm room. The good thing was for me personally that I could work out right in the room adjacent to mine. They all came to our place to work out. That day I was doing my pectoral muscles with Yegor when Sergei came along. He was a bit mysterious and pensive. He was about to dress up for a workout, then change his mind. Said he would come later and left. Later that same afternoon a police officer came and said that Sergei was in trouble, meaning that they had just rounded him up. Damn, when I remember the police of that time and what issues we used to have with them, just think how humane they used to be then. They would care to come and notify you. A few weeks before that, he with his accomplices robbed an apartment, took a VCR and other Japanese electronics, which were very expensive back then in USSR, and when they just had left the apartment, they almost ran into who they had just robbed in the stairwell and who were returning home. So it was just a matter of time to find and arrest Viking in a small town like this. He got 3 years, sentence suspended. We're all so happy for him that they hadn't put him to prison, didn't ruin his young life, that the child wasn't deprived of his father. The lawyer, a beautiful woman, did a good job convincing the judges not to ruin the guy's life since he had no records and he was the only provider to his only son and wife. It happens to everyone, and he sincerely repented. I didn't know Sergei had so many friends. As if the whole town was there at the courthouse. That very afternoon, when Viking was released from custody, there was a banquet in the best restaurant in town. His friends collected for him nice clothes, and Sergei was happy. It felt cool to have good friends. I certainly did not expect Sergei to get serious anytime soon. And he never did. Yet another year had passed. Sergei and Yegor got a PC somewhere. Unlikely that they had bought it somewhere. It was years before the PC would ever come along there. Which sold good, and with the money they made, they took a leave and went to Sochi. They had a good vacation, met some girls. They came back tanned and full of impressions. Dashing 90s were coming along. I'd probably shock the Russians, but I love the 90s. Yes, the USSR collapsed, but I had long foreseen that, besides the USSR drove bonkers not only the whole world, but drove bonkers itself. I heard that the Soviet Union immigrants were crying when they learned about the gone USSR. But, believe me, no one was crying for it here. But this is not what I like the 90s for. Yes, the population was getting impoverished and I was getting down along with it, but I had a hope that we would become a normal country. There was a freedom. Maybe we had too much of it. The country was rapidly turning into one big Chicago of the 30s. We had a free TV. Once on one of the Central Russian TV channels in the most watchable time, When even children didn't sleep yet, the most hardcore Caligula version was aired, so I and my wife weren't even able to wait to its end. Sure, it was a bit too far, but you know what I mean. It was intoxicating and euphoric. But at the same time, the real fascists of the extreme Nazi version were creeping along in this country. And in the mid-90s, the Russian still-free newspapers started seriously discussing the possibility of Russia turning into a fascist state. Trending was already taking its direction. And I was seriously worried. To tell the truth, I didn't think it would be that creeping and obtrusive. It's still not that real. It's a Mussolini-light style that is taking shape here. Getting back to the point. Viking and his friends better had to roll up their sleeves. The real work was about to start for them. There were a lot of emerging hoodlums thirsty to pick the feathers of newly arrived entrepreneurs. But I was against it. We even didn't have as many entrepreneurs as we had those ready to rip them off. And Sergei's friends, one after another, started getting hooked on heavy drugs. Not that I felt pity for them much. Good riddance for most of them. Projecting to the middle of the 2010s, those were the quintessence of vigorous Putin's electorate. But they were Sergei's friends. With Thomas no longer around, after his fight with Tooth and the commotion with the Broken One when Tooth had saved Thomas's life, he just left. I felt that they sooner or later would get Sergei hooked into it, and I worked proactively to keep this from happening. I would tell Viking stories about yet another case with an addict having his golden shot. We had more and more of such cases in Raduzhny. In the meantime, the Broken One was pretty tight using the needle and melting in front of our eyes. Tooth had just started taking shots too. Yegor had already tried it and liked it too. I read somewhere that should one addict come along in a neighborhood, the 5 more will come along with him as well. To all pyramids, it's a pyramid. Not any multi-level marketing can even compare with it. Starling was an authoritative bandit who came along. He was squeezing some businessmen, often in favor of the others, the tougher businessmen, but quickly was becoming a subman. One day I came home and there was a strong smell of acetone in our apartment, so it even hurted my eyes. Starling, the Broken One, and Tooth inside all were mysterious and quiet. Then such a smell began to appear more and more often, and then it never went away. It required a lot of acetone to cook the dried poppy cut straw, and they boiled it in it. There was a foggy acetone stench in the kitchen. Once, when I was at work, this fucking poisonous fog exploded. Since then, the walls and ceiling in our apartment were black. Our apartment was turning into something terrible. A fucking drag shack. Once I had a conflict with the 2 of them, the ones I hated the most. No, they were no longer humans. Either I would kill them or they would kill me. But this horror was yet to come. They all were still alive and in good health yet. They were Vikings' friends and I tolerated them too, as long as Sergei still was clean. But I had no confidence he would stay clean. Every time I came back from my hitches, I was afraid that he had joined the club. So far, he was good. But somehow he treated them with very much of his understanding. With ironic and tolerant sympathy, I would say. I remember once playing cards with Sergei when I told him that if he ever gets me in line, Our friendship would end right then and there. He said nothing. He only snorted, I think. Probably it was somewhat rash and presumptuous on my side to be calling myself his friend. Normally, I am very cautious about things like that, and I am being careful about using the words like friend, enemy, traitor, love, and so on. I'm a man without compromises, and I am not flexible, and I perceive such concepts as a guide to action. Think before labeling someone. If you called someone an enemy, kill him. If you call one a traitor, punish him. If you love, go with it to the end, and be ready to die for a friend of yours. Or don't call one of either of those unless you are ready to handle all these. So probably he knew better when he was snoring. What the fuck was I talking about telling him that? All I wanted was to keep him away from what was coming. And I failed. I even remember the day in 1991 when he consciously and almost solemnly, for the first time, participated in the preparation of his first drug injection dose and his first shot. I got the impression that most don't get it right from their very first shots. Tooth didn't like his first shot, as he had said. All he felt was a wave of heat. He said he kept holding a fan close to his head. He felt so hot. His diastolic pressure must have surged prohibitively high. It's okay as long as you're young and healthy. Your heart is still capable to handle it. Even clean opium destroys the body. But if it's prepared in such a barbaric manner they did with acetone they got it from nearby garages they used to dissolve the paints. Then they use an anhydride agent to neutralize the acetone. All was done approximately by sight. This poison, a homemade opium mixture with partially neutralized acetone in it, was eating out their bodies right in front of my eyes. The broken one had trouble finding his veins for yet another shot. He had long stopped injecting in his hands since he had no veins there. No, he did find them on his feet. He was having his shots in his thighs, somewhere at his collarbone in front of a mirror. Viking enjoyed his very first one. He had his first rush and got high in full. And he began to change fast from that day on. On his first one, I desperately tried to talk him out of it. What the fuck are you doing, Sergei? Don't you see what is happening to the broken one? Do you want to be the same? And he snapped back at me. Don't I have my head there? So please stop lecturing me. I just want to try it. That's it. Don't fucking worry for me. I'll handle it. Well, that was fucking it. I just want to try. I thought he was a grown-up guy, not a kid. He had a kid of his own. So I realized that Sergei was a goner to me. But I still had a faint hope that Sergei will get serious someday. But Viking, unless he was high, was constantly depressed now. He even had cooled to his wife Angela. When he was high, he constantly talked to some girl on the phone, which was stolen and illegally connected to an existing network by our talented craftsman Albert, so we never paid for it. Yes, Sergei tried to jump off from all this shit several times. I was told, I was at work again, that once Sergei did not even open the door to the broken one and his gang, pretending nobody was home, but the gang began to break down the door. When Viking opened up the door, they had a fight. Later, I'll stay a bit more on the junkie's relationship. Whenever Viking tried to quit taking drugs, he'd take to drink instead and would become dangerous. He would just walk around the town with a knife in his pocket. Fortunately, no one had picked him on then. Then he would go back to shooting up again. I worked 2 weeks on and off, and whenever I was back, I was scared of the apartment what it was turning to. The toilet was just impossible to go to. I gave up cleaning the apartment up, and nobody else would ever do that anymore. Some shady new faces showed up I had never seen before. Like some Georgian who had a lot of lemons delivered to the town, and these lemons now were everywhere, and apparently the money he had made were well spent on drugs. Though by his hollow cheeks it was evident that he wasn't a beginner, he still apparently could combine business with such pleasures of his. When he invited Viking and his friends to his birthday party, he told them with relish that there, among of exquisite Georgian cuisine, in the middle of the table will be spread laid dozens of syringes with shots. So anyone who ever wants it could have a shot at any convenient time. What a sybarite and a culture vulture he was. An expert in pleasures. And sure, he knew how to deliver it exquisitely. He was a Georgian, all right. 5 years after that, a homeless person on a train station drew my attention. Just an ordinary bum who walked up and down the station. Several times he even looked at me as if he wanted to say hello or something to me. I tried hard and I couldn't remember where the hell had I seen him. And then, bang, I remembered him. That old man was that Georgian guy. Junkies have a saying, if you want to know a person, get him hooked up into these mess. The moral degradation the most clearly was illustrated on those tough guys with criminal ethics. I said it to Viking too. Those who used to be ready to give their lives for each other were so cheapish now, and for an extra shot of that shit they fucked each other over, and it was very unpleasant for me to observe this. If they fucked each other over, that meant they never trusted each other either. The junkie community is strange. As school fishes, I think, have more motivations to stay together than those addicts. In the meantime, I was no longer living in that dorm. Then I got married. I didn't communicate with these guys any longer. I saw Viking in 1994. I borrowed him some money he urgently needed. His mother was sick and needed his help. Well, nothing was sacred to him anymore. And he vowed he would give me the money back that very next day. I had no illusions on account that he ever would return my money, but otherwise there was no getting him off my back, you know. It was better off to give him some to him and then have him hiding from you. That's what happened. He had never come across. Real deadbeat. I heard that he somehow was participating in some residential transactions in this town. He had pawned some of his friends' apartments and had sold a couple more while owners served their times. For what he got stabbed and barely survived. I saw Yegor once the best friend of Vikings. Yegor got married and had 2 daughters now. When I mentioned Sergei, Yegor cursed him and said what a wild man he was. He'd never seen a person as low as Sergei was. Well, I told him, what about a friendship they used to have? These things always meant something to me, even if they were in the past. To what Yegor said, that all that was just his mask he was wearing. If he had only known what kind of a guy he has turned out to be. To what I noted that he had just turned into a junkie one. That was it. Simple. Then I heard Sergei's Angela turned a junkie too. Once I saw her too. She was with her 8-year-old son, and right in front of him she asked me for money to buy some bread. Sure, I gave her some. She still looked okay. Just she might have lost some weight or something. She had gotten divorced from Viking. I couldn't help thinking about her relatives. What they had to go through with a woman like Angela. Next, I saw her, I guess, 7 years after that. She was just an ugly, wasted woman I could barely recognize. She looked scary. She was toothless. I hoped she wouldn't recognize me. She did. But she was shy of my wife and quickly disappeared. I heard she moonlighted pimping. I just tried to picture how the prostitutes should look like with their pimps like this. Viking had died in prison somewhere. He, the junkie one, had a better chance to survive in prison, even in a terrible one we normally have in Russia, than in the free side, and I believe he had lived in prison longer than he would have in the wild.